My name is Ilias Vartholomaios. I am the CEO and co-founder of Owiwi. A few very quick words because I know I have a very limited time to present this presentation for you. Owiwi is essentially a game-based assessment provider, and what we have done is created an assessment tool to help companies assess and screen prospective and existing employees' soft skills through a fun and immersive game that can essentially gain insights that would otherwise be attainable. In today's presentation, basically my focus will be to show you how game-based assessments and other technological tools in general can play a critical role in increasing and improving your organizational attractiveness. That's the more scientific term of just saying employer brand. And essentially the importance of applicants' reactions and their attitudes and the perceptions towards your brands. And the experience that you provide obviously plays a critical role to that. So basically staying ahead in business today is all about finding new ways to attract and identify and inspire an energetic workforce. After all, your greatest assets are your employees, even though the term assets isn't necessarily as complimentary. But essentially, in the premise of this discussion, we want to advocate the abolishment of the term employer brand as an all-encompassing term, and instead give you some inputs that can make you sort of reconsider what we mean by that terminology. To that end, there are three key areas that I would like to focus on in this presentation. Quickly running through them, it's going to be how to grow your employer brand, the importance of simplifying the candidate application process, and finally, creating a positive recruitment and candidate experience. So basically, employer branding is the act of cultivating an employer brand. It's essentially the identity or the persona cultivated by an organization, and it's typically communicated towards the public. In short, a strong employer brand affects your bottom line. It helps with retention. It helps to attract qualified candidates. It lowers your costs, save money, and boosts overall performance. And you better believe that there will be people talking about you negatively, about your brand or your work environment, if that experience is negative. So especially in today's world with social media and platforms like Glassdoor, it's becoming increasingly important that companies both communicate and display a healthy working environment, a process that is respectful towards the candidate. Because in turn, this in the era that we live on of technology, we can hear everything through the grapevine. And these are just some quick statistics to give you an indication of the impact that a positive employer brand can have on your bottom line and with regards to your talent acquisition. More importantly is the fact that employer branding plays a key role. It's a little bit more hard to quantify and to measure, but unfortunately there are a lot of hidden costs associated with it. And the ultimate risk here is that you will end up making what companies consider a bad hire. Now, a bad hire doesn't necessarily mean that a candidate does not have the right qualifications or skills or personality for that matter. It just has to do more so with the fact that perhaps the job fit wasn't as good. And there are a lot of conflicting sources as to what a bad hire can cost. I obviously went for something in the middle ground because it can range from as low as £30,000 all the way to 240. Either way, even in the absolute worst case scenario, it is evident that enhancing your employer brand can really save you a lot of money in the long run. And we can even see a little bit further down in my presentation how a negative candidate experience can cost you way more than just £132,000. To that end, the next step that I would sort of like to focus on is the aspect of how important it is to keep your application process simple. And to that regard, my recommendation to a lot of companies would be to sort of reconsider or sort of look into what your HR tech stack is. So similar to how developers have tech stacks where they can sort of select which technologies and tools will help them achieve the mission and the objective of the organization, the same thing applies with HR. And in the last 5 to 10 years, the HR sector has seen an unprecedented wave of growth. There's an incredible amount of tools out there, but likewise in the hunt for companies to acquire the best possible talent, they have to realize that we are in the age of the war on talent. And when your top candidates, your top prospective employees are only in the market for 10 days, it's increasingly important to be able to have a process that can both identify them, attract them, and facilitate their completion of the application process. I remember speaking with a lot of large organizations, and for better or for worse, their processes were so long-winded and so convoluted that even top premier talents who had expressed very strongly that they would love to work for that brand would drop out of the application process to a rate of about 64%, especially when they neared the end. Because at one point, after a certain point rather, it's just sort of like, you know what, I really like this company, but I just can't deal with this anymore. It shouldn't have to be this difficult. You might be familiar with how Google used to be notorious for running numerous interviews, but they realized that, very quickly that this is actually a turnoff, and a lot of people will not stick around for that. So as good as your brand is, it doesn't mean that you're impervious or completely protected and then you can do whatever you want. It's a fine balance of science and art, and always keeping it human. And while automation is great, and I'm a big proponent for it, I think that when it comes to HR, it's a little bit more important to remember that we are talking about the human factor. And even as the sort of founder of an assessment company, we do not want to be the sole reason that a hiring decision is made. We need to keep the process human, and at the end of the day, much like in a culture, just be kind, be considerate to the steps that candidates have to take in order to apply and work at your company. Now, most importantly, the premise of this presentation is positive candidate experience. Basically, we mean the whole journey from the time that they become aware of the position and all throughout the stages until they are hopefully and ultimately hired. Why does it matter? Well, there's a lot of benefits, too many to list here, but very, very, very importantly, it's the fact that it's a candidate's market out there. So if you still believe that you have the upper hand, you are wrong. Candidates have the power and the capacity to completely influence and change a way a company might structure its application process. And they might even select companies where, especially with the millennial and Gen Z generation, it's not so much about the brand anymore. It's about the mission statement and what they do that they most identify with. And unfortunately, negative experiences can destroy your brand. We always hear about the negatives because those are the ones that usually make it to the limelight. But there are a lot of success stories and a lot of positive stories to take away from that. But sometimes I feel that the fear of the whip supersedes the benefit of the carrot. A prime example of this is, for example, Virgin Media, where they essentially, got their numbers together. To their credit, one of the few companies that do. And they essentially realized that their current or their then recruitment process and candidate experience was costing them a load of money. In this particular case, being a consumer product where people were also subscribed to their services, a negative experience actually had a tremendous impact on their financial bottom line, resulting in them losing £5 million dollars apparently annually. Another thing that I've seen lately making the rounds on LinkedIn is the candidate resentment calculator. There's a link at the bottom. I'm sure you can look it up on Google really quickly, but this basically just goes to show you the impact rather, that a negative experience can have on the propensity of your prospective or existing employees on purchasing or using your products. And obviously larger brands are more susceptible to this because they're more recognizable and most likely we use those services. So this is a fun little tool that you can experiment with when considering your process. What can you do to improve the candidate experience? It's like I said, it's about keeping it simple, anthropocentric, and human, and being kind. Help them prepare, make them feel comfortable during the interview. They're scary. Allow various application options and offer flexibility. Keep it short but precise without necessarily sacrificing the insights that you want to draw out of the process. Automate as much as you can, but obviously keeping in mind that too much automation is not a good thing. Providing feedback to unsuccessful candidates is key. Conducting the right job interview is key. Asking the right questions obviously goes hand in hand. And you can obviously also rely on third-party tools, the same tools that you use as your HR tech stack, to draw testimonials and feedback to see what they think of the process, because what they say about the tool will also reflect about your brand. So what we've done at Owiwi is tried to take the old and unsophisticated means of assessment and try to essentially bring it into the new age era and to put it in a format where the next generation sort of understands. The general premise is that we rely on situational judgment tests, but with a spin, which essentially takes place in a fictional environment and sort of provides the aspect of a stealth assessment. So an assessment tool that measures something where you're not sure what it is or how it's measured, and in turn actually has the reverse psychological effect of you providing more genuine responses and thus a more accurate profile for the hiring manager. But obviously being in a gamified format, it's a lot more fun and satisfying for them. And being mobile supported is obviously a key aspect to keep into consideration, because about 90% of all processes and job hunting will take place through a mobile device. To that end, offering superior experience is obviously what's helped us sort of thrive in the market. And likewise, what you see here are some of the metrics from our 500,000 users who have used our assessment tool. And in turn, this is actually feedback that can reflect on your own brand and your own process. So a positive experience with the tools and the partners that you work with will ultimately fall back on you. And likewise, the same thing applies for a negative experience. And especially when you have a referral program in place, which is considered one of the most accurate ways of actually measuring your employer brand, you can get a very good idea of where you stand and what your candidates or applicants think about you. Recently, we published a scientific paper. You can actually access some of our other scientific papers on our website, on our resources page. I'm going to have to quickly go through this because I think I'm running out of time. I'm very stressed about this 50-minute time slot. But like the premise of the presentation is that we're looking at how the role, rather, of applicant reactions on organizational attractiveness. And that can be defined as people's general attitudes about an organization or as a place of employment. And the applicant reactions themselves are exactly that: their attitudes, their effects, and their cognitions towards a selection process. A key thing to consider here is that what plays a tremendous role in applicant reactions is actually what tools you use as part of the process. It's actually extremely highly correlated. So a negative experience with one tool can actually completely negate any effort you've made, rather, on that front. It's also important to consider that, especially in today's generation, a lot of us are gamers. A lot of, if I was in the conference room, I would ask you, how many of you here identify as gamers? And I would probably see, out of a room of 20 people, 5 guys raise their hands. The truth is that there's a lot more gamers out there. And the key thing to consider here is that a lot of women tend not to consider casual games like Candy Crush or Farmville as a video game. They have more of the associated stigma of hardcore gamers playing World of Warcraft or anything like that. But the truth is that these newer generations are completely in tune with video games. It's a big part of their society and their upbringing. And approximately, they will spend approximately 10,000 hours to complete a high school diploma. But parallel to that, they'll also complete another 10,000 hours of gameplay. So you have a formal and an informal form of education through video games. And that's why I believe that game-based assessments are a big proponent of and should be more incorporated into an application process. The benefits of game-based assessments are many. In the case of applicant reactions, and based on the scientific studies that we've carried out, we've seen that they can actually improve this would be the key takeaway here, that they improve the applicant reactions and their intentions to recommend the process or the company to their friends. Moreover, it also makes your brand and your company look more technologically innovative, more quirky, and more progressive, not quirky, wrong expression, more progressive and more tech savvy. But obviously there are limitations, just like anything else. You have to be careful of and take into consideration validity studies behind it. And the fact is that, it's not just a blanket statement solution or silver bullet that if you gamify everything, you will have success. It's a matter of balancing it and finding the right combination of tools to be used in a specific process. Finally, the thing that I would like to say to close this presentation is something that I've experienced from my experience trying to sell gamified assessments. It's important to consider, from a stakeholder perspective, who your audience is. Because a lot of the times what I see is that you have a lot of senior level managers who are interested in gamification and game-based assessments, but they're completely detached from the audience that they're actually trying to recruit and attract. And as you can imagine, for those who are parents out there, there might be a big generational gap as to, who the customer is, and that's you, the company, paying for the assessment. But the consumer is not you. And there's a lot of bias sometimes there. And it's important to sort of detach yourself from that and to realize that this tool in this gamified environment is not for you. It's for the candidate. So that's something that I've seen is, and what I feel is a good takeaway point from that. That marks the end of my presentation. I don't know if I'm in time, and I hope I didn't bombard you with too much information there. But thank you for your time, and obviously I'll be happy to answer any questions or to connect with you in any way that you like.